Hello everyone, welcome back. Gresham Glover here. Today we are going to focus on making some really cool little paper flowers, and we're going to just use something as simple as a post-it note, so please stick around. Okay, starting off, I'm just going to lay down my cardboard flower template, and you can make this template any size you want depending on the size flower you want to make. In this case, I want to make really small flowers. I'll leave on my Instagram an image of the template so that you can print that out for yourself. And once you have the template and you lay it out on whatever size piece of paper you want to make, if you want to vary the size of the petals of the flower, you just need to, of course, make wider slices than what I'm making here. And if you want to, of course, make longer petals, you make longer slices. So you might need to adjust your template to satisfy whatever size flowers, or if you have a specific species of flower that you want to make. Here I'm burning the leading edge of what are going to be the petals, and I do that just to give it a little bit of variation so that it doesn't look like it just doesn't look like it's cut from a piece of paper. So just typically it just gives it a much more of a natural organic edge. One thing to keep in mind when you're working with paper, you of course are going to need a very sharp razor knife of some form. I'm using a scalpel, but you definitely want to only work with dry paper when you're cutting. If you get the paper at all damp with paint or a wash that you're working with, and then you're trying to cut it, it's going to end up tearing the paper. It doesn't matter how sharp your knife is. So it's important, just make sure that you're working with dry paper, and if you do paint it and then decide you want to go back and make a cut on the paper later, dry the paper out first and then go back and do your cutting. And this doesn't necessarily have to be done with a scalpel. You can also use scissors. That would work as well. Now here, it's important that I'm not using any glue at this point. I just want to wrap the paper around the toothpick just to start the shape of the flower. And what I'm going to do here is that the opposite end from where we've cut out the petals, this piece right here that I'm pinching, this is going to be cut off later, and that's going to actually become the opposite end of the flower from the stem. And that maybe doesn't make any sense right now, but it will later. For right now, it just gives us something to hold on to. And I'll use a little bit of CA glue and work that down just so that it keeps the entire thing from coming unraveled again. But basically, once I slide the toothpick out, I want to get that, twist the cone so that I get it as tight as possible. And now I'm sprinkling a little bit of baking soda on there, and that reacts with the CA glue and cures it instantly. And here I've got some of the petals were sticking up, so you just take a torch or a lighter and then just give it a quick little hit, and that'll make them all have the same length. And here, just for the sake of working with it for painting, I stab a wire into the end just to hold it for the painting process. I'm using an airbrush, but it's not necessary to use an airbrush for this. You can also just use a small paintbrush. But like I said, the paper gets more unstable the wetter it gets, so you just want to be careful not to get things too soaking wet, because the petals are so delicate. If you get them too wet and then try and touch it, they'll just tear completely off. And then here you can see where the paper has spiraled. There are some very noticeable lines that look unnatural. So what I do is I take a little bit of CA glue and I'll add it once I'm using it. Right now I'm fixing it to the wire. But what I'll do is I'll take a toothpick and I'll put some of that CA glue, I'll paint it basically onto the edge to fill up those little seams from the paper spiral, and then I'll sprinkle more of this baking soda on there. You'll see me doing that now, I think. Yeah, so here I'm just gonna twist it, paint it around, make a mess with the glue. And it's okay if it is messy, because the flowers, they are, if you look at them in nature, they're not really, I mean, the petals themselves are perfect, but if you look at the plant of a flower, they're all different kinds of shapes. There's all kinds of little hairs and fuzz and broken dead branches and broken dead leaves. They're never really perfect. And so here, this was what I was saying earlier, and this seems a bit counterintuitive. I'm just lopping the head off of everything I just created. But what this is going to be now is that piece you see there is going to be the end of the flower, and the other piece, I'm going to put a dab of hot glue on there to kind of create the bud base of the flower. And again, this process, it's not important that it looks very neat. It can have some lines and folds and things in it. It's going to make it look more realistic as a flower. So what I want to do now is I want to take this piece of wire and I'm going to heat the end up so that I can stab it into the hot glue. And that is going to be our flower stem now. So just get it hot enough. Now to create a little bit better transition between the bud of the flower and the stem, I'm just gonna wrap a little bit of hot glue around the stem. And then a little bit of paint.